Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, it's Iten here, Executive Director of the Planetary Health Collective. As you are coming in, feel welcome to drop an introduction in the chat. Let us know your name and where it is that you are joining us from tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to give people a couple of minutes to trickle in, and we'll be getting started a couple minutes after 4:30. Hello, everybody. If you have just joined us, welcome. My name is Iten Salahi. I'm the Executive Director of the Planetary Health Collective. Please go ahead and drop an introduction in the chat so we can get to know you a little bit better. Let us know your name and where it is that you are calling in from today. We are also going to be dropping a link into the chat here with information on how to do a land acknowledgement if you'd like to know whose land it is that you are on. So for example, I am calling in from the unceded territory of the Tongva people today. Awesome. I love seeing familiar names here. Hi, Stacia. So good to see you again. So we will be starting in just 1 minute. Great, we just dropped that land acknowledgement link in the chat. So pop in over there if you'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Stacia said, I can't get enough of these. Well, we can't get enough of having you here either, Stacia. It's always such a treat. Awesome. Okay, so we'll probably be having some more folks joining us as we get moving, but in the interest of time, we are going to go ahead and get started. So again, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Iten Salahi. I'm the Executive Director of the Planetary Health Collective. And tonight you're joining us for a panel series that is near and dear to our hearts that we've been running on a monthly basis for over a year now. And this is our Planetary Health on the Menu, Nutrition and Sustainability Careers panel series. So we like to bring on leaders in the space in food and nutrition and sustainability who are finding a way to forge sustainability into their careers and are have generously donated their time to be here with us tonight so that we could learn from their journeys and be inspired by them and kind of troubleshoot and talk through the realistic what it really means to try to be integrating sustainability into your career in food and nutrition at this stage. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. If you have not yet done so, please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, where it is that you're calling in from. Feel free to use the land acknowledgement link that we dropped into the chat as well, just to know whose land it is that you're on. And let us know what it is that you're most excited to learn about tonight. We always love to get that feedback so we can continue to make sure that these events are super valuable for you guys. So let's go ahead and get started. And also, if you've not yet muted your line, please go ahead and do so now. Thank you so much. Okay, all right, quick run through of the agenda. We're just gonna quickly go over some norms and etiquette for the call. I'm gonna introduce you to who we are at the Planetary Health Collective, and then I'm gonna pass it over to Mary Purdie, our Director of Education at the Planetary Health Collective, who is going to be moderating a Q&A with our two panelists today. And then as we go through the event, you'll all have the opportunity to drop questions into the chat that we can ask our panelists today. So please, we love to keep these events pretty casual, pretty active. So, engage with us. Let us know some thoughts that come up, what statements have been, what resonates with you, what inspires you, what issues it is that you're bumping up against in your career, so that we can be of service to you and so that we can connect with you a little bit better. And then we'll finish up the event today with an audience Q&A. So as you guys submit questions throughout the course of tonight's panel, Bretta will be collecting them and she'll be moderating our audience Q&A. And at the end, we will wrap up with some opportunities for you all to get involved with us at the Planetary Health Collective if you feel called to do so. So briefly, norms and etiquette, same as they are on most of your Zoom calls now. Please go ahead and mute your line if you've not yet done so. Introduce yourself. One thing that we also like to ask is that you please update your name with your pronouns. So you can do that by toggling your mouse over the top right-hand corner of your video square into the, whether you see the 3 dots, click on that and hit rename. And you should be able to update your name with your pronouns there. Please also, this is a no-brainer, practice respect here. This is an identity affirming and safe, diverse space. So any kind of hate speech, which I know is not going to happen in this community, will result in removal from the chat. Has not happened yet. We have a great track record. Let's not break that today. So we also like to encourage participation. So like I mentioned, keep it casual and respectful. So please drop your questions in the chat. And again, introduce yourself if you haven't done so yet. And finally, our introduction to the Planetary Health Collective. So I do see some familiar names here, but if you're new to us, this is who we are. The Planetary Health Collective is a movement of food and nutrition professionals who are passionate about finding a way to integrate sustainability into the work that we do, because we fundamentally believe that we have a really powerful and unique role in improving sustainable food systems and simultaneously improving human health at the same time. So we do this by activating, incubating, and elevating leadership potential among a community of food and nutrition professionals who are passionate about the intersection of food, health, and climate. We provide educational opportunities like one that we actually have coming up this Friday that I will share a little bit of information about just shortly, where you can learn what the connection is between food, climate, labor, racial, health justice, and culinary education, different cultural practices around food, what sustainability actually means, depending on what context you're in, and how we can connect on those different meanings and activate ourselves in our careers and in our personal lives to create a more sustainable future. We also provide, we call it incubation opportunities, but more like mentorship opportunities where you can come and chat with members of the PHC community. On the first Friday of every month, we have food and climate coffee chats, which are free. They're essentially like office hours for people who are interested in learning about how to integrate sustainability into their work, but they aren't sure how. So we usually pick a topic that we present on for a few minutes, share some resources, and the rest of the time is really dedicated towards answering your questions when you come in to chat with us. And that's with one of our members of the steering committee. And of course, we are also working towards building up our capacity to activate our community. So stay tuned for some really cool updates on ways that we are going to be doing that towards the end of the year and into 2023. So before we jump into the panel, I want to share some opportunity with you guys to engage with the PHC. So this Friday, we have a really awesome event coming up, and I want you all to be aware of it. It's our second Cook for the Climate event. It's a sustainable cooking class alongside a conversation with a chef. And we spotlighted 2 specific ingredients. We'll be cooking with pomegranate juice and pistachio. And we'll be having Chef Jamil Arzino, who is the first ever culinary director of the James Beard Kitchen, teaching us how to make a vegan charo cake recipe, which is an original pastry that she developed made from phyllo dough, vegan pastry cream, and pomegranate gelée. It sounds advanced, but she is incredible, and she's going to teach us and make it very accessible for everybody. And we have free tickets. So if you want to learn from a James Beard chef how to make a vegan pastry to impress all of your friends and your own taste buds, join us this Friday for Cook for the Climate. We cannot wait to see you there. And let's get back to our panel series tonight. So I'm going to pop it back over to Mary to introduce our 2 panelists for tonight. Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you to our panelists for being here.
Thank you, I-10, and welcome to everybody who has already joined us, is just joining us, might soon be joining us, those who are listening to the recording. So glad to have you all here. We are indeed going to be a powerful force for change in the nutrition and dietetics and chef communities and students as well in helping to mitigate the climate crisis. And I want to acknowledge that we are in a week where in the UK, temperatures are reaching and have reached the highest on record. And so the urgency around this climate crisis could not be more apparent at this moment in time. So I hope that encourages us all to continue to seek out pathways that we can make a difference, whether it's in our own communities, our professional lives, or even on a small scale in our own personal spaces. So without any further ado, it's always a pleasure to welcome our panelists here, two people tonight who are making a difference in the world of nutrition, and would love to introduce each one of them and then have each one give about a 7 to 10 minute talk about what they do, why they do it, and how they do it. And then I will ask some questions, and then we will give you all a chance, if you've got questions for them, to ask your questions as well. We share our community with you all. So let's take it away first off with Kristin Sukis. Let me give her an introduction. Kristin Sukis is an educator, activator, and advocate working at the intersection of our healthcare and food systems. She attended the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy to study the connection between agriculture, nutrition, and sustainability, and learn effective strategies for systems change. Currently, she works as an independent consultant, leading advocacy, strategic planning, and coalition building initiatives. So without any further ado, Kristin, welcome.
Thanks, Mary. So happy to be here. So as Mary said, I'm working at the intersection of a bunch of systems and currently working as a freelance consultant, providing policy and strategy assistance to nonprofits and coalitions. When I was thinking about how to introduce myself to this particular community of nutrition and sustainability professionals, I realized there were two main points for attendees to keep in mind. One, my career path, like many people's and probably like yours as well, has been quite the zigzag and definitely is ever evolving still today. And also, while sustainability has been a core value and interest of mine, the way that it's been able to show up in my work over the years has definitely varied greatly. I hope in sharing my story that you can feel a little bit more flexible and exploratory in how you can weave your interests into paid and unpaid parts of your lives. To give you the short and sweet, I'd always been passionate about the connection between human and planetary health. And I had a particular fondness for plants growing up. I grew up in a family that had multiple landscape architects, and there were a bunch of stories of my grandparents' tree nursery business as well. Yet it wasn't until college where I actually honed in on plants and the power of plants in agriculture and food systems, that's at the center of my interest of nutrition and sustainability. Over the course of the 5 years between undergrad and graduate school, I explored many different ways of living and working, tipping my toes and sometimes my whole body into the restaurant industry, international education systems, farm work, closed loop community compost systems, and even the ski and mountain bike instructing world as well. My work took me to live in Honduras, Wyoming, North Carolina, and Spain. And throughout all of those experiences and all of those different places, I dug deeper into the role of food systems and community health and well-being. Finally, I sought out a graduate program that could provide me with additional knowledge and skills to be more effective in shifting our food system to prioritize health and sustainability. Mary mentioned that I went to the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. And for me, that was extremely appealing because it allowed me to both focus on nutrition and sustainable agriculture, and it also provided the opportunity to leverage science for action and advocacy too. Throughout graduate school, I applied those skills to help Marley Spoon, a meal kit company, conduct an environmental assessment of their impact on household food waste. City Harvest, a food bank in New York City, I helped them redesign their Healthy Neighborhoods corner store program across 5 different boroughs in New York City. And the Somerville Food Security Collaborative. I really helped them explore ways to address systemic racism in municipal food systems. And also I provided recommendations on how to fortify food pantries as safe spaces for immigrant families in the fears of changes to the public charge rule. After graduate school, I took a position working as a policy analyst at the Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation of Harvard Law School. And there I worked on 2 policy initiatives. One, focusing on policies, promoting policies to decrease the consumption of sugar, and then also policies to increase access to medically tailored nutrition, food and nutrition programs, or food as medicine programs through the healthcare system. I spent about 4 years working at Chilpy at Harvard Law School, and I worked to support numerous state and federal policy changes. I built a robust statewide coalition called the Food as Medicine Massachusetts, wrote a few hefty policy reports as well. Happy to share some of those in the chat. And I provided technical assistance to a variety of advocacy entities, from coalitions to city government, to state government, to individual nonprofits as well. And then I also led Chilpy's DEI task force throughout those years too. Today, I'm continuing my work in the food as medicine space and applying similar skills and working on integrating produce prescription programs into DC's healthcare system. I'm also serving as a public health expert on Seattle's Sweetened Beverage Tax Community Advisory Board. In Seattle, that brings about $23 million into the city a year, and that supports food access programming as well as early childhood education. And then I'm also working with the Planetary Health Collective on building out their advocacy educational opportunities and supporting farm bill campaigns like Regenerate America. Lastly, outside of work and outside of my volunteering stuff in the professional space, I also volunteer with a local bike organization called the Bikery. And as you can see from the things that Mary said and things that I'm talking to you about, I definitely love working at the intersections of things: food and healthcare, economics and nutrition, sustainability, and the healthcare system. And that's a lot. And generally speaking, you're kind of interacting with 2 of those things at once. But I'm really working on pulling on the healthcare system, human health and nutrition, and then also planetary health and sustainability. And, with that said, sustainability has not always been the main focus of my work to shift Medicaid policy for the healthcare system to pay for healthy food, but I've been working to integrate sustainability kind of deeper into those systems changes. So sometimes it might show up, maybe in the nutrition standards for the types of foods that these food organizations are providing, or additionally in the types of partnerships that we're bringing in, or the types of support and like coalition collaboration that we're creating. Because food as medicine, for me and a lot of other advocates, isn't siloed from the broader nutrition and sustainability agenda. It's integral to it. And so I've definitely taken it upon myself to make sure that these multiple things are intertwined. And sometimes that happens and it goes the way that I want it to. And other times, you push a lot, you advocate a lot, and it doesn't quite land the way you want it to too. So I have a lot of experience on things working and things not working, really, when it comes to sustainability in these spaces. And I'll just leave it at there for now. I'm happy to go deeper. Wanted to give you a brief background on kind of how I ended up here, but then happy to talk more about my work throughout the Q&A.
Awesome, Kristin. Thank you so much. What a wealth of information you are, and what a wealth of experience you've had already in so many different places. I feel like you're like 80 years old. How can you be so young when I feel like you've lived like 19 lives?
I'm a cat, Mary. I don't know.
Got some good anti-aging cream going on there. Thank you so much. All right. Well, I definitely have some questions for you, because I think a lot of the work that you're doing is super intriguing. And I imagine that many people who are on this call tonight too are going to have some questions. So feel free to put your video off for now. I'm going to introduce Marissa, and then we'll come back to you for additional questioning. So let's talk about our next guest, our next panelist, which is Marissa Thiry. MSRDN. She is part of the Global Nutrition and Sustainability team sustainability team at Taco Bell that leads Better For You menu innovation, nutrition communications, and sustainability initiatives. She also has experience as a nutrition services manager at St. Mary's Medical Center in San Francisco, California, and has written for the Academy's Food and Nutrition magazine. Thanks so much, Marissa. Take it away.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. So great to be here with you tonight. As Mary said, my name is Marissa Theory, and I am one of 2 registered dietitians employed at Taco Bell. I have been here a little over 5 years now, and as she mentioned, I'm part of the Global Nutrition and Sustainability team. We are a small but mighty team of 4, but we are growing. And our team really manages anything involved with improving our food, packaging, and systems at Taco Bell for both individual health and the health of the planet. The Global Nutrition and Sustainability team is part of the larger food innovation team of 60 or so people, which includes things like quality assurance professionals, engineering, food scientists, chefs, product developers, packaging experts, etc. So it's a very talented, very creative, very intelligent group, and it's an awesome place to work. Specifically, I lead nutrition in North America, so that's the US and the Canada market. And just to kind of give you some context of scale, in the US alone, we have over 7,000 restaurants. So it's a pretty big impact, but I also do support international markets as needed because we are the only 2 registered dietitians in the Taco Bell system, and actually the larger Yum system. The work that I do really falls into 3 buckets, and that would be compliance, innovation, and affairs. So when you think of compliance, this is really like anything and everything regulatory and nutrition regulation. So that would be something like on the national level, menu labeling, which is really overseeing the calculation and the display of calories across all systems and channels, which could mean our menu boards in restaurants, our website, our mobile app, in-restaurant ordering kiosks, things like that. And then at the state and local level, that's maintaining compliance and making sure we are truthful and accurate in legislations like sodium regulations that are currently in place with New York City and Philadelphia. I also really oversee any external commitments, like our commitment to reduce added sugars and calories in our beverage portfolio, as well as things like sodium reduction across the menu, other things in that category. It also includes internal policies, like what is and is not allowed in our food, and supporting other product developers on our team when they are innovating new menu items or new ingredients. So anytime they want to ask or need a new ingredient they want to use, they would run a permissibility assessment by me. It also includes things like allergen labeling and management, as well as food and nutrient claims and labeling. In the innovation part of my role, this is where I feel like my job is super unique because I actually work cross-functionally as a product developer. So I am in the test kitchen at Taco Bell cooking up the next big idea, which is super fun. And I think it's something that kind of sets my role apart from some other opportunities in the nutrition and dietetics fields. So the things that I'm working on currently, I really lead any self-health or better for you product development. So that would be, like I mentioned, reducing sodium in our ingredients, clean label work, which is removing artificial colors and flavors and preservatives where possible, as well as on the menu item level, this would include things like the vegetarian platform. So not many people know this, but Taco Bell was actually the first quick service restaurant to have a menu that was certified by the American Vegetarian Association. It's something we're super proud of, and I get to work on all vegetarian innovation for the brand, which is really, really fun. Unfortunately, I can't tell you everything I'm working on at the moment, but I can say that there's some good things coming soon. And then lastly, the part of my job that I have a true passion for as well is the affairs or the communication side. So I actually have a background in communications. Before I was at Taco Bell, I worked for a global PR firm called Weber Shandwick. And from there, I really found my passion in communications. So I went on to get my master's degree from Boston University in health communications. So this is just an area of my job that I absolutely love, and that's any and all food and planet storytelling. So within that area, it could be something like being a brand spokesperson, which includes speaking engagements at conferences and in media like this one, or writing publications, really any storytelling we do for the brand. as well as stakeholder engagement. So one of my pet projects a few years ago, which I absolutely love, is launching Taco Bell's first ever nutrition stakeholder network, which was called the Food for All Fam. And it's really designed to be a two-way dialogue with registered dietitians. Currently, we have a network of over 80 registered dietitians who are in no way paid by our brand, but we get to engage with them regularly, tell them what we're working on at Taco Bell, but also we want to ask them, you know, where should we be pushing the boundaries? What are you working on? How can we be a resource to you? Things like that. And so we have regular newsletters with them. We do webinars sometimes. Pre-COVID, we were doing in-person meetups at Sensi and other events. So hoping to get those started again soon, but just really great engagement to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the nutrition landscape more largely. And yeah, so in a nutshell, that is my job. No 2 days are the same, but I guess how I got here, I love that Kristin actually said the word zigzag about her career path, because I feel that is so relevant to so many of us. But mine was very similar. It was not a linear path by any means. I actually started at Taco Bell as an intern during my undergrad and fell in love with it. I really truly thought I would end up in sports nutrition before I started here, and then found a new passion for the food industry. So I went back and finished my undergrad and then completed my dietetic internship in Chicago with Aramark. From there, I took a nutrition management role at a hospital in San Francisco, which was a fantastic experience, but just found that for myself, clinical wasn't really where I saw myself long-term. So I moved back to Chicago and started at the nutrition communications role at Weber Shandwick. Fell in love with food communications, knew I wanted to get back into the food industry, and that's when something opened up at Taco Bell to come back full-time. So I've been here about 5.5 years and absolutely love my job, and my role has just grown exponentially since then. And I'm excited to just be here and talk to you all about it more.
Well, thank you so much, Marissa. You know, I think when people think about sustainability, Taco Bell may not be the organization that comes to mind immediately. So it's really fascinating to hear your perspective and some of the initiatives that are in play there. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more. I've got some questions, and I have a feeling we're going to have some questions from our audience as well. Let me bring, and I got to tell you one quick thing too. When I was in college, I did periodically eat at Taco Bell, and I was a vegetarian at that time. This was in the 90s. And the go-to was the 7-layer burrito. So I think, I'm sure that still exists. Yes, this was a long time ago, but.
You know, we have a ton of vegetarian stuff on the menu now. It's much larger than it was when we just had, you know, the 7-layer burrito and the bean burrito. So I would encourage you to come back and try some of the new things like the black bean crunch wrap.
Okay, good to know. All right, great. Well, let's bring back our first panelist, Kristin. If you would join us with your video on, that would be wonderful. And hopefully we can get all three of us pinned here so everyone can see us. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So I know we have a lot of folks in our audiences who always want to know how did you get here? How did this happen? And Kristin, I want to start with you about something that you mentioned. You mentioned some really fascinating things you did. I apologize if I'm getting the names wrong, but you said, oh, I worked with these closed loop community compost systems. I worked with City Harvest redesigning things. I worked with someone named Marley, somebody working with them. How did you actually get those jobs? Was that an application? Was it someone you knew? Did it start as an intern? What was the process for getting there?
Yeah, the process was really connections. And being on listservs, for example, Marley Spoon really wanted an independent evaluator to come on and help them with this big project that was part of their sustainability team. And so at the time I was in graduate school, and a fellow student and I kind of applied and started working with them and got access to a lot of their data. And in the end, did most of the project, did probably steps 1 through 3 out of 5, and then had to pass it off to other consultants. But it was just by being connected and being looped in, to be honest. So that was for Marley Spoon, the meal kit company. And then with City Harvest, fortunately, that was an internship that was during graduate school. But I mean, I got thrown into the works there, and we worked on redesigning this big nutrition program that had existed for 5 years. And we were at a critical juncture where we were redesigning the entire program. And what that meant was like a lot of literature reviews and looking at the research and saying, here's how we have done it in the past. What research has come out to say, you know, we should change things. And then also the community engagement part. We were working with bodega owners across New York on like their experiences with the program, how we could improve it. And then also community members too. We were working with community action networks. We established these community action networks in the boroughs, brought community members together, got their feedback, and then used that to redesign a program moving forward. So that was just through other connections, internships. And then for others, simply just following my own interest. You know, I randomly decided to work at a compost company, and I was the director of operations and outreach for them in North Carolina, across the entire state. And so, you know, just a lot of these things, I was at a point where I didn't have very much experience, but I just wanted to learn. So, you know, never stop following your interest, even if you don't have that experience. You have no idea what kind of opportunities are going to open up for you.
So true. Keeping that open mind, that open heart, that desire to keep learning. And yes, internships, both of you mentioned that was a key part of what launched part of your career, and volunteering, and also just maybe being connected to listservs. I think that's been a huge opportunity for many people. Marissa, question for you regarding something that you spoke about. You mentioned your communication strategies and your communication skills, and I happen to know you're a great writer. When it comes to Taco Bell talking about their sustainability strategies, how are they positioning themselves and how are they communicating that information? And are you a part of it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We are very much part of it. Our team really is integral to the food and planet work that we do here, whether that's in the food or the packaging or the systems or anything that happens at Taco Bell. I think the food part has been, we've been working on that for a little bit longer, so we have a little bit more history there, but I think there's so much good work happening in the planet part of this project as well. We actually report in, Taco Bell is run by Yum, or not run by Yum, but Yum is our parent company, which is part of Yum family is Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, KFC, and the Habit Burger and Grill. And we report every year into Yum's Recipe for Good report, which is actually coming out in a few weeks, I believe, from the 2021 edition. So that's really where you can see a very robust deep dive into what we're doing in all different areas like sustainable palm oil and packaging. And you can kind of see the whole gamut of what's going on in this landscape.
Interesting. Yeah, I know that there was a report that came out, the Nielsen IQ report, which talks about how many customers and consumers are really concerned and interested in purchasing from organizations and businesses and brands that have a sustainability initiative. So really making sure that we have that ability to communicate that information is key. And one more question for you too, regarding the vegetarian options. You mentioned that was one of the things that you were working on. I know you can't tell us everything about what's happening in the test kitchen. That's okay. How are you as a dietitian able to leverage your ability to either create meals, to understand the health benefits of vegetarianism or vegetarian or more plant-based options? How can you leverage that information that you have as a dietitian in terms of informing and helping Taco Bell move in a direction that has more plant-based options? What's been the pathway there?
Yeah, I mean, I think plant-based eating, there's no secret that is a trend that's not going away. So as a brand, Taco Bell, recognizes that. And the beauty of it is, like, the bean burrito was on our menu when we opened our very first Taco Bell 60 plus years ago. So this has already been ingrained in our brand since the get-go, which is awesome. I think as a dietitian specifically, it puts me in a unique position to help navigate like the regulatory and the compliance side, making sure that we do have that third-party certification system with the American Vegetarian Association, just to lend that credibility to the people that truly do want to make sure that the enzymes are checked out and things like that. But also to understand kind of like the consumer side of it and how you talk about it and put it in that fun Taco Bell marketing spin that like nobody else can do out there. So it's kind of bridging that gap between compliance and regulation and certifications, but also fun Taco Bell, exciting food that people want to try.
Great, thank you. And back to you, Kristin. Along the policy front, I feel like this is an area that a lot of people, they get a little stuck because it's so huge. I find myself, and I'm into policy, and I still find myself feeling overwhelmed. What kind of education or getting up to speed on policies do people actually need in order to participate, even on a very basic or small level, in policies related to food and climate and environmental justice and issues such as those?
Yeah, I think the barriers to participate are actually fairly low. I think it's just like fear of not being educated enough in that space, or fear of maybe thinking that your voice doesn't count. And so I would say, in terms of what you need to know, it's really like how to make your voice heard. So, even simply, picking up classic phone call or email to your state representatives, state house members, that's a low bar of like things that you can do. And then, as you go forward, you can meet with folks on a personal level, policymakers, or even folks that aren't maybe like the council members per se, but different researchers, to learn a little bit more about these issues. And then there's a lot of opportunity for commentary or testimony, maybe for pieces of legislation, for example. A lot of the policy work that I do is, while some of it is state and federal legislation, a lot of it isn't. And a lot of it is even more accessible. A lot of my work is writing comments on guidance, per se, or, maybe because I'm working a lot in the healthcare space, because it's a public entity, they have to announce, hey, we're going to make these changes. We're requesting information. We're requesting some kind of commentary or expert advice on this. And so I think it's thinking, making sure your voice is heard in any way, shape, or form, but then also knowing where to look for those particular opportunities to provide commentary too. So like I said, it's like everyone thinks about policy as in laws, and in like, the Congress, state, federal level, what have you, but really a lot of it happens at the institutional level, at the state level, at the county level too. And so I think just narrowing down to maybe even your community to say, what's happening in my community? Who are my council members here? What are their perspectives on these issues? And how do I even just talk to them about that?
Great points. And I think people don't realize that there are policies at a hospital. There are policies in a school. There are policies in different community organizations. So that's great to be reminded of that. And if someone wants to get a little bit more information about food policy specifically, what is a go-to resource for you?
They're really all over the place. There's a lot of food coalitions that are focused on specific policy areas. So you have maybe FRAC that's focused on like one policy area. A lot of the federal nutrition programs like SNAP, for example, or food stamps. And then you have other coalitions, some of them that I mentioned today that operate in my space, the food is medicine space, like the National Produce Prescription Collaborative, Food is Medicine Massachusetts, the coalition that I'm working on forming in DC right now, DC Food is Medicine. But then you also have like these, I feel like these think tanks, or also these news outlets too. So Civil Eats is a news outlet that I go to a lot. They're often covering policy. Politico, Morning Ag is something I also go to a lot. Tends to be on the federal side, so maybe a little bit less local. But I would say if you're looking for kind of a lower lift and something that's a little bit closer to home, just start Googling who the food banks are in your area, the food providers. You'll probably find out that they're in other food-based coalitions that are in your neighborhood. And so start there first. And everyone loves to get an email from some community member that's saying, hey, I'm interested in what you do. How do I get plugged in? And so don't be scared to do that, I think.
Excellent. Thanks for reminding us about some of those organizations. And if you want to put those in the link or drop a link in the chat, that would be great. You reminded me when you mentioned Civil Eats that Heal Food Alliance is another great one to be aware of. And they really work with like an anti-racist and equity lens as well. Marissa, back over to you. Question about what you feel like prepared you to work in sustainability. What was either an educational tool that you have found to be beneficial, an experience, maybe a conversation that allowed you to feel confident in your ability to talk about sustainability in the food system?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I have classic nutrition training. So I came up through the nutrition side. I'm a dietitian. As I've worked at Taco Bell, my career has evolved, and nutrition and sustainability have become one team. So I've kind of naturally gravitated into that space. But I think to some degree, that is a little bit terrifying because you almost feel like maybe I'm not qualified to be in this space in the same way that others are. So for me, I actually, because I have such a passion in communications, I tend to lean on that as a skill, but also as like a gateway into these conversations. So for example, I do a lot of freelance writing, as you mentioned, Mary, and I write quite frequently for the Food and Nutrition magazine. So I started pitching these sustainability topics that I feel like I know I have a pretty good grasp on them, but I could be better and I could learn more. And in that process, if your assignment is accepted, the editorial team is pointing out resources to you. They're editing your work. You're doing your own deep dive in research. You're talking to subject matter experts like yourself, Mary. That's how you and I got connected. So I think in doing that process, you actually come away from it knowing way more about a topic. And that's kind of how I've expanded my own skill set into that sustainability space, to take it from nutrition to nutrition and sustainability and have more of a bird's eye view on food systems as a whole.
Excellent. That's really helpful to hear. Well, I'm going to wrap it up on my end. I have a million more questions for both of you, actually, but I'm ready to just zip it over here and pass it on over to Bretta so she can get some of the questions that we've had come into the chat. So thank you both, and I will talk to you and see you soon.
Thanks, Mary.
Amazing. Thank you guys both for sharing. We have a couple of questions in the chat for you guys to wrap up today's meeting. Marissa, I'll go ahead and start with you. Someone has asked, we all know that change and innovation can take a long time in the public policy sphere. Do you find it easier to make positive change from within a private organization? And what are some of the barriers to change that you experience with working at Taco Bell?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just based on our scale alone, there's actually a ton of barriers that come with that. It's both what's the old saying? Like it's a blessing and a curse, because any little impact you make, if you reduce a little bit of sodium or you make one piece of packaging recyclable, that is a huge impact at 7,000 restaurants across the US. But it also means it's really hard to make changes. Because nutrition and sustainability, while they are incredibly important, are not the only factor in decision-making for a brand of this size. So as an example, a few years ago, I had this idea about a certain type of produce that I wanted to use. And I came in and I was pitching this idea and I thought it was great and I was showing it to leaders. And in that process, we uncovered, in order to do that, we actually have to go out and procure the produce, plant it, wait a few years for it to grow. And then you better hope it's a really big bet and everybody wants to eat this produce in a couple of years. So there's just so many implications. And of course that, with supply chain and the way it is these days, that it makes things really, really hard to do. But it also makes them that much more rewarding when you do get a win and you can make that change because you know that you're impacting so many people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's just really insightful and super helpful for everybody. Kristin, with everyone seems to be wanting to know how they can get involved in public policy and kind of bringing people together and creating change. And with some of your work with building coalitions, I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, and just kind of looking at like what lessons you've learned from starting a coalition, like what kinds of things do people need to be aware of as they're looking to create this community change?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm so happy to dive into that. I wanna first kind of give some thoughts, my own thoughts on the question that you asked Marissa too. And really, from my perspective, it's this difference between like public policy versus institutional policy, which I mentioned before. And I call that, and my colleagues call that, big P policy versus little P policy. We're very sophisticated, but it's really a question, because this big public policy takes a really long time to change, and you have to map out these incremental wins along the way to not only like personally stay motivated, but especially, and this relates to the coalition building too, to have all of your partners stay motivated too, and the community to stay motivated, and to keep this kind of top of mind. But then, as you're going through this, I've also been working on a lot of institutional policy, whether it's healthy vending policy, policies in like health departments or hospital settings, or procurement policy in school or hospitals or jails. The organization I work for right now does a lot of institutional procurement work, definitely in the jail food space as well. And who's to say if it's easier or not, but the institutional policy space seems to be a little bit more nimble. And similar to the states being, this like experimentation space for democracy, I think institutional spaces have a little bit more autonomy generally, and things and culture shifts and norms can start there and then expand outward as well. And so I am constantly thinking about how can we start with institutional policy as a change maker on the way for big P policy. I could talk all day about that though, and like examples of that, but I'll get back to kind of coalition building. So coalition building happens a variety of ways. In Massachusetts, where I worked on forming the big statewide coalition, my colleagues and I at Harvard first started with a big research project. It was a 2-year research project. And the way that we went about this research project is that we pulled like a multi-stakeholder steering committee together to guide the work of this. And at that point, that was like 30 organizations already, because we wanted to make sure whatever we were producing for the state, we wanted to make sure there was already buy-in. So to create buy-in, it's important to involve those organizations from the get-go. And then once we had this big policy report that mapped out a bunch of policy changes that would be useful to expanding these access to nutrition programs, we opened up coalition membership even wider. And that original kind of advisory committee is the steering committee of the coalition. And now it's the coalition broadly is over 200 members big. And so one of the lessons that we learned during the earlier days when we were flying, definitely like, building the plane as you fly it, is the need for trust and this foundation of trust between organizations. Trust, and I also, I think that organizations want to make sure that things are getting done, that there's actual movement, that there's projects that are moving along, that there's opportunities to get plugged in where they want to get plugged in. And so making sure that you're not over promising and that you're kind of building slowly as you have the capacity to make sure that this advocacy body is fully functioning. And then cut to DC, where I'm doing this work now, we're doing it a little differently. We didn't start with a report or some kind of material that folks could rally behind. Rather, we have a community of practice, a bunch of food as medicine organizations, the Capital Area Food Bank, Food and Friends, and DC Greens. We've been working together for a number of years, just kind of sharing tidbits on how our operations going, what's happening during COVID, how can we adjust these things. And they're going from an informal space of just sharing those pieces of information to saying, hey, we want to get serious about kind of activating ourselves in the broader community around food as medicine. So currently we're working on creating a strategic plan with the 3 organizations, and then we're opening up the strategic planning process to additional kind of key members and key stakeholders, the mayor's office, food policy councils, folks involved in the healthcare space like clinicians, and creating that buy-in, whether it's from the report or for the strategic planning process, is really important. And then again, making sure that you have those connections to be effective the way that people want to be. Are we setting up meetings so all of those coalition members can have their voices heard with council members? Are we, providing access to the detailed information from the Department of Healthcare Finance in DC to have one-on-one exchanges with them? So that's another example. But then throughout my work at Harvard, I also provided technical assistance to a number of other states that were forming food as medicine coalitions too. And it happened very differently depending on the state, always community driven. And that might look different. It might look like definitions are slightly different. It might look like, they need extra resources and funding to launch a project that's like folks can rally behind. It also looks different in like Idaho, where I worked for a little bit of, it's kind of a paint that, food as medicine has been painted as this like blue kind of issue, but it was in a very red state. And so how do we kind of socialize this concept? How do we message this so it's broadly appealing and bipartisan, because it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. I think that is really helpful for just people going out, and as you talk about things too, just being mindful that like this is something that impacts everybody, and that getting that community buy-in regardless of where you live is so impactful. We're coming up on time. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to hit a question for both of you guys, kind of about how you, your career paths and how you figure that out. So from the chat, how did you determine what to focus on in your fields? And then how did you identify those key skills that you needed to cultivate so that way you had these opportunities to pursue? And we'll just go back to Marissa, and if you have any thoughts on that, and then we'll come back to you, Kristin.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, transparently, I knew I always wanted to do nutrition, but my passion was born in sports. I was a high school athlete and I loved it. And so I just assumed that I would naturally gravitate towards sports dietetics. The opportunity to work at Taco Bell came up when I was in undergrad. And in my internship, I took it and was completely blown away by the food industry and Taco Bell as a whole. And it really kind of changed the trajectory of my career. I just found that I loved the food industry so much. And for me, there is, in nutrition, there was kind of two different paths, more generic than like clinical food service in that, but more there was the prevention side. Where you're fighting change from within systems. And then there was the treatment side, where someone is kind of already sick and needs nutrition management afterwards. And I knew that I always wanted to work on the prevention side. I wanted to be making changes before someone got sick to help people from getting sick, things like that. So the food industry just really was a natural fit for me, and I loved it. Beyond that, I will say I took any and every experience I could to make myself the most eligible candidate when a full-time opportunity came up. So I do not miss the days of undergrad where I was like volunteering. I was working at a clinical research institute. I was working at a restaurant to get food experience. I was, a candy striper at a hospital. I was doing everything I could. I don't miss those days. There was a lot of sleepless nights. I ran on coffee, but I wouldn't say that I was really honing in on anything in particular other than just trying everything and seeing what I gravitated towards in the end.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. We do typically reach a lot of students, and that's really the hardest thing is like, what do I do now? Like, how do I get to what I want to do? I'm still so overwhelmed by all the choices. And I think that and just reflective of what you guys have already talked about, do a lot of different things, and then what you really enjoy will kind of come to you. But Kristin, what are your thoughts on that, on how you kind of honed your focus and what skills you decided you wanted to cultivate?
Yeah, I think my overall perspective of it is the same as Marissa. Like, get involved, do whatever you can do to get involved. You like an organization, you don't really know why you like them, and you don't maybe feel like you have anything to offer them, go and get connected with them, talk to them. Maybe they have a project you can work on so that you can learn more about them and also develop like diverse skill sets. A lot of my opportunities also came from just kind of volunteering and getting involved. I participated in the Somerville Food Security Coalition, and I had already been kind of attending these meetings for a year and a half. And then a project opened up. They needed help, you know, kind of looking at racism in the local food system. And similarly, the way that I got my job working at the Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation was that I actually went to the Greater Boston Food Bank and I said, hey, I have this final project. I have experience working with food banks. I would love to, you know, to kind of dedicate time to working on a project for you. I can kind of offer these GIS services and mapping services for anything that you're interested in. And they didn't have the capacity, but they pawned me off to Harvard, and Harvard needed somebody to work on mapping. And so that's how I kind of entered that position at the Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation. And that evolved to a full-time position. And a lot of the other things that I've done have just been like exploring my own interest and just kind of getting over my fear, I think, really.
Awesome. I think that's really inspirational from both of you. And I think there's just so many opportunities and things that are outside of like that traditional dietetics track where, you know, you do have those kind of 3 paths, and there's just so much more opportunity even now. So even for myself, I don't have a very traditional dietitian job, and I do a lot of things that I was never actually taught to do. So yeah, thank you guys for sharing that. And then because we have 5 minutes left, I have one final question for you guys, which again, you've kind of touched on, but I was hoping we could get really clear on it and just kind of dive into like how the food system, like how overall broader like food system sustainability impacts both of your jobs. So at Taco Bell, how does the food system and its sustainability impact you? And then how does food system sustainability, particularly Kristin, impact like your work in food as medicine? Is that something people are looking at? So we'll go ahead and start with you, Kristin.
Yeah, I'd say people aren't paying attention to it as much as I think they should. And so trying to bring sustainability more into those spaces has just been kind of like a rallying call, I think, for me and maybe some other folks that I think it's a priority for. And so, you know, trying to just broaden the perspective and the messaging a little bit in, you know, thinking about like the impacts of sustainability on communities that are already disenfranchised and are already, you know, kind of battling food insecurity and battling chronic conditions too. I mean, COVID-19 showed, you know, how interconnected chronic disease is, poverty is, and economic policy and nutrition and our healthcare system. And, you know, we've really, as advocates in this space, we've really been using that as an example of saying like, hey, this is not unique. I mean, maybe unique in this, like how big it's been, but like, it's not unique for the future. You know, these issues are extremely intertwined. And, you know, when I think about kind of where I'm going next with this, and like with my work as it evolves, I'm even thinking broader. I'm thinking universal basic income. I'm thinking voting rights, and like sustainability is part of this too. You know, just to say, we shouldn't be worrying about like the sourcing of specific nutrition programs. We should be worrying about like the sourcing of food that's available for everybody and just the options that are available. And so, I mean, I can get extremely meta with this, and so I'll stop there, but that's where my head goes initially.
Yeah, amazing. I do think it's definitely being left out of major conversations, or a little bit cherry picked in the way that we to like serve people's particular goals, which you know, all progress towards sustainability is great, but at the same time, like we're missing out on that bigger piece where we can actually have a really big impact. So Marissa, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is another fantastic question. I think truthfully, you can't talk about nutrition without talking about sustainability anymore. They're so interconnected. So for my role, I've just seen that evolve over the 5.5 years I've been with Taco Bell, is that they're always, you know, one in the same, or weighing, you know, how does one impact the other, or what's that relationship? So I think sustainability as a whole is very much part of every conversation we have now about our food. But more largely, food system is, I mean, we rely on that. That is who we are as a restaurant brand. And with the scale that we have, like those things are so critical. So, climate change obviously impacts the produce and the things that we're growing for our food. So it's such a cyclical relationship. Animal welfare, we have a ton of animal products on our menu, like animal proteins. It's all part of the conversation. And while it's not necessarily always part of the marketing, which is, I think, where people get hung up, is like, oh, we might not be marketing it with every taco, but there were always those conversations on the back end to get that to the menu. So I just think the food system is largely misunderstood in that space, because I think sometimes people think if it's not what you're talking about, then you're not doing anything. But there's so much that goes on behind the scenes, and every company wants to do the right thing and be transparent about it, and provide something to their consumer that they want and that they feel good about eating. And Taco Bell's no different. So I think we'll definitely see more in this space as we continue down this path as a whole.
Yeah, that's great. Honestly, I am been enlightened on Taco Bell sustainability initiatives. And I think that's really great, because some people are, they are like shouting about their sustainability and what they're doing, but they're not really executing that on the back end. So executing on the back end is probably more important than just saying you're doing it. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to turn it back over to I-10, but thank you both for joining us. And thank you to everyone who has attended today. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Thank you.
Amazing. Marissa, Kristin, thank you both so much for joining us tonight. This was a really awesome conversation. I mean, part of the reason that we love to have these panels is that it's an illuminating experience for everybody to just get a sense of what kinds of opportunities there are out there to bridge food, health, and sustainability. And Kristin, you said something awesome about how, bringing sustainability to the forefront of systems change is really a rallying cry. And that's what these panels are. We really want everybody to bring this to top of mind and have these kinds of productive conversations about, where change is really happening and where we're struggling to make it happen, and some of the groups that are doing the work and how they're doing the work and how that work is being measured, so that we can exchange ideas and create more rapid and impactful change. So we're so grateful to have the both of you here. To everybody who joined us tonight, thank you so much for being here. We hope this was really productive and enlightening for you guys as well. If you enjoyed this panel, please join us for a future one. We have them on the third Tuesday of every month. They're all free. So please join us, share with a friend, let people know they can get involved with us this way. And don't forget, if you're interested in joining us for a James Beard chef-led cooking class this upcoming Friday, please join us, bring a friend. Our free tickets are limited, but I believe we do still have some. I think we're dropping the link in the chat right now. And some other ways that you can get involved with the PHC, just email us, hello@planetaryhealthcollective.org. If you would like to work more closely with Kristin, she will be heading up our policy team. So reach out, let us know if you're interested in policy. We actually have some really exciting projects coming down the pipe with the policy team. So if you want to work with her, you want to get more involved with what PHC is doing to activate our community and provide more actionable tools for our community, please reach out. Again, email us, hello@planetaryhealthcollective.org. Join us this Friday for Cook for the Climate, and register for a future panel event if you like this one and are looking for more inspiration. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. Look out for the event recording, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care. Stay in touch with us.
Bye, everyone.